What is going on, guys? This is the Conor Chepenik Podcast. I want to say thank you for tuning in. Today I'm excited to do a read of an article I recently wrote for a publication called Common Sense. Fitting, the article is about Thomas Paine's Common Sense. So let me get my screen shared out here, and I will go ahead and read it. So the piece is titled Common Sense in the Modern Financial World. Today is July 8th. It's a Saturday, and originally this piece was released on June 30th. So I went to my local library, or I guess the Belmont Library up the street from me in Massachusetts, and checked out Common Sense by Thomas Paine. And there were 7 quotes that really resonated with me. And what I try to do with this article is take those 7 quotes and apply them to our modern day world. So let's get into it. Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense in 1776 during the American Revolution. His purpose was to advocate for American independence from British rule and to inspire colonists to support the cause. Paine aimed to challenge the authority of the British monarchy, expose the injustices of the British government, and rally the American people to embrace a republican form of government, emphasizing the principles of self-governance and individual rights. In this essay, I will showcase 7 of my favorite quotes from Paine's influential work, demonstrating their enduring relevance and the valuable lessons we can learn from them today. Number 1. Society in every state is a blessing, but government, even in its best state, is but a necessary evil, in its worst state, an intolerable one. Throughout recorded history, the protection of private property has proven to be essential. In the absence of organized governance, individuals with power often exploited their strength to seize what they desired. Governments emerged as a means to establish a higher authority, yet, as Paine astutely remarked, government, even in its best state, is but a necessary evil. With the advent of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto introduced a groundbreaking system that grants property rights to anyone worldwide through a network operating on rules without the need for rulers. By leveraging mathematics and open source software, private property can be secured in a manner that surpasses traditional government structures. This inherent incorruptibility of mathematical principles serves as a robust safeguard against human fallibility. Over time, governments tend to succumb to corruption, incompetence, and mistakes that can lead to the breakdown of society. In contrast, Bitcoin's decentralized nature and reliance on mathematical algorithms offer a more resilient foundation for protecting private property and upholding societal stability. Quote number 2. The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. It is dearness only that gives everything its value. Thomas Paine's voice echoes through time, reminding us that true value and appreciation arise from overcoming challenges and persevering in our endeavors. These sentiments find resonance and relevance among Bitcoiners. Engaging with Bitcoin requires dedication, as it entails countless hours of learning and understanding. Even after obtaining a profound comprehension of Bitcoin, securing private keys and weathering the volatility of the asset when measured in fiat currency pose ongoing challenges, albeit ones that become more manageable with experience. As one delves deeper into the Bitcoin rabbit hole, the inevitable truth becomes apparent. Fiat currency is on an inexorable path towards worthlessness. While some may view Bitcoin as a get-rich-quick scheme, a more fitting analogy portrays it as a safeguard against the slow erosion of wealth. I like the mantra, "Don't get poor slowly, better." Paine's quote also applies to the practice of money printing. Central banks worldwide have grown accustomed to creating credit out of thin air and using this freshly printed money to pay all their bills, including the interest they owe on their previous debts. This practice has led to inflation and a devaluation of the currency. Individuals who toil for their earnings tend to be more mindful of their spending, in stark contrast to those who can create money without an opportunity cost. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. The Congressional Budget Office in 2020 released a chart illustrating the alarming trajectory of debt-to-GDP ratios projected to exceed 200% by 2050. At our current rate, it may not even take that long to reach such levels. It has become unmistakably clear that those in positions of power harbor no intention to halt the incessant money printing, consequently devaluing fiat currencies. And for those just listening, there's a chart that says federal debt held by the public 1900 to 2050, and the projected amount is, like I mentioned, expected to go to 200% by 2050. Common sense unequivocally urges us to acknowledge that these entities will persist in their relentless printing endeavors until fiat currencies teeter on the precipice of worthlessness. Hence, it would be unwise to wait until the 11th hour to seek refuge. Through my extensive study of Bitcoin, I have come to a realization. Simply telling others to buy Bitcoin is not an effective approach. The persuasive strategy to orange pill people lies in encouraging them to learn about Bitcoin. By immersing themselves in its intricacies, individuals can make informed decisions regarding its merits as a superior form of money compared to fiat currency. Quote number 3. A long habit of not thinking a thing wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being right. Seyfedin Ammous highlights a significant historical event in his book, The Fiat Standard. During World War I, the Bank of England issued bonds for war financing. Only one-third of the bonds were subscribed, indicating a lack of public interest in supporting the war. However, instead of halting the war effort, the Bank of England resorted to a rather unconventional approach. They extended a line of credit to their two top officials, empowering them to purchase the remaining two-thirds of the bonds. In essence, the bank utilized its monopoly over money to self-fund and sustain a war that citizens clearly did not support. This top-down control exhibited by central banks has had long-lasting consequences and has allowed certain individuals to amass wealth without contributing real value to society. And then for those just listening, there's a meme of Drake basically putting his hand up in disgust, and it says, avoiding war because the public clearly doesn't have the appetite and only bought one-third of the bonds. And then under that, there's a picture of Drake smiling, pointing, and it says, lending credit to the bank's two highest-ranking members so they can purchase the remaining two-thirds of the bonds in order for the Bank of England to fund the war. It is worth noting that the Bank of England, established in 1694, holds the distinction of being the world's 8th oldest bank. This historical context is significant because central banks have become so ingrained in our modern world that no living individual has experienced a time when they did not exist. While many argue for the necessity of central banks, I wholeheartedly disagree with this notion. In my view, the world would be a better place without the presence of parasitic entities that monopolize the most critical market of all, money. And then there's a picture that's a Ron Paul quote that says, it is no coincidence that the century of total war coincided with the century of central banking. Quote number 4. It is the good fortune of many to live distant from the scene of sorrow. The evil is not sufficiently brought to their doors to make them feel the precariousness with which all human things hang. When it comes to the harmful consequences of printing money, the true extent of the damage is not always apparent, as it tends to be obscured. Some individuals in America engage in virtue signaling by displaying the flag of Ukraine on their social media profiles, portraying themselves as supporters of a just cause. However, it is crucial to recognize that war brings no winners. Both sides suffered the tragic loss of lives. As ordinary citizens, it is our responsibility to demand an end to this conflict. While it is undeniable that Putin's actions have been terrible, simply printing more money and providing it to Ukraine will not solve any of our underlying issues. In fact, it only serves to prolong a deadly war, resulting in even more loss of human lives, while corrupt leaders strategize how to finance post-war reconstruction. And then there's a picture of a meme. Basically, it's someone with a MAGA hat yelling at someone with purple hair inside of a fish tank, and outside that fish tank is a banker smoking a cigar watching them, and then it says, they got you fighting a culture war to stop you from fighting a class war. Quote number 5. The mind once enlightened cannot again become dark. Bitcoin, often joked about as a cult, does have its share of cult-like behaviors among its proponents. However, I believe this stems from a deep-rooted desire to rectify the inherent corruption in the current system. To an outsider, Bitcoin enthusiasts may come across as mean, toxic, or rude, but it's important to understand that the ethos of Bitcoin revolves around the principle of do not trust, verify. Instead of solely relying on social media narratives, I encourage you to personally engage with Bitcoiners and witness their true nature. I am confident that you will discover a community of incredibly compassionate and caring individuals who firmly believe in the power of fixing the monetary system to ultimately mend the world. Quote number 6. The strength and power of despotism consists wholly in the fear of resistance. When the U.S. military possesses the ability to utilize force and coercion to seize assets, it may seem that resistance is futile. However, this dynamic changes when the use of force and coercion no longer guarantees successful confiscation of wealth. Before the advent of Bitcoin, it was possible to perpetuate acts of violence to acquire someone's wealth entirely. However, with Bitcoin, if an individual securely protects their private keys, the government can still harm them physically, but they cannot seize their wealth. This creates a significant shift in the equation where the cost of attacking remain constant or decrease, while the benefits of an attack decrease significantly. Bitcoin effectively raises the cost of oppressing the people, making it economically burdensome for tyrannical forces to subjugate the masses. And then 7, the final quote. Until an independence is declared, the continent will feel itself like a man who continues putting off some unpleasant business from day to day, yet knows it must be done, hates to set about it, wishes it over, and is continually haunted with the thoughts of its necessity. In 1776, we declared independence from the British. Today, our task is to declare independence from fiat currency. While losing the ability to print the global reserve currency out of thin air is not without its challenges, it is imperative to move away from fiat currency for the greater good. Although there may be some difficulties in transitioning, America will emerge stronger as a result. The beauty of this endeavor is that it can be achieved through peaceful means, Unlike the violent revolution of the past, we no longer need to take lives to declare our independence. We can simply choose to stop relying on fiat currencies as our primary store of value. So I don't have too many thoughts, but I enjoyed writing this piece. I think Thomas Paine's Common Sense, I sat down and read the whole thing cover to cover in one sitting, and it's a beautiful book, and he just lays it out so beautifully why we needed to revolt from the British. And it's pretty insane. I believe it was like a 2% tea tax or something like that. It was a very minimal tax compared to what we pay today, that we revolted against the British because we believed in no taxation without representation. And nowadays we're being taxed a ridiculous amount. And while, I personally, as you can imagine, as a Bitcoiner, lean a little more libertarian and, kind of reside in the camp that taxation is theft, I do understand arguments saying, well, who would build the roads, or the classic one, right? Or, how would, anything get done? I'm not saying there doesn't need to be any taxes whatsoever, but I think we should be provided fair value for what we pay with our taxes in spending money, for war in Ukraine, spending money for all these ridiculous pork programs the government does. I don't think are right. I don't think we should be paying taxes to corrupt institutions. And I think Bitcoin fixes a lot of this, because now people can take their wealth with them and move anywhere in the world. And it basically makes it so the government is kind of forced to go ahead and actually provide value for the taxes they receive on our behalf. I think it's a beautiful thing that we don't have to pick up arms anymore to revolt. I don't want to go and fight the U.S. government. It's, despite all its problems, it's still one of the strongest militaries in the world. And, I'm very grateful that our military does protect our freedoms. But I think we should be focused internally. We should not be going around the world, poking the bear or trying to start wars that we have no business being in. And I think Bitcoin's a beautiful thing, because I think it'll make these wars completely infeasible, completely uneconomical, when the government can't just create money out of thin air to go and finance, wars that the people wouldn't choose. I mean, for all its faults, fiat currency definitely allows nation states to wage wars indefinitely. Because like I mentioned with the Bank of England thing in this paper, they essentially created money out of thin air, gave it to their two top-ranking officials, and told those officials to buy the remaining bonds so they could keep fighting. Because before that, a nation state would fight until its treasury was completely depleted, and then it had to stop fighting. And nowadays, that's not the case. And, it is a huge advantage. If you can print money out of thin air to pay for the war, well, yeah, then you have a huge advantage over the person you're fighting if they cannot print money, out of thin air to fund the war. And as the U.S., we have the global reserve currency, and it's probably a big reason why we have the strongest military in the world. And I don't want to see that end, but I think the ethos and the ideals that made America as great as it is today, a big part of that was our Bill of Rights and our Constitution, that basically protects people's private properties and does everything in its power to make sure that a tyrannical government cannot come to be. And I think politics is downstream of economics, and I really, like this shirt says, if we can fix the money, I really believe we can fix the world. So yeah, thank you guys for listening to the podcast. Let me know your thoughts below. I'm always eager to expand my perspective and see if there's something I'm missing here. But yeah, it's interesting learning about fiat currency and Bitcoin. And like I said in this piece, do not buy Bitcoin, but actually go and learn about it. And I'm pretty convinced that most people who take the time to learn about it will end up buying Bitcoin ultimately. But I think it's a lot easier to hold such a volatile asset when measured in fiat currencies when you actually understand from first principles what Bitcoin is and what it offers the world.